Good morning, everyone. We are continuing with our guidelines of conduct for the Ananda way of life from the rules for the Sevaka order, the guidelines for the Sevaka order. The first thing you may notice is the backdrop is different, and this extraordinary chair, which I will show you a little bit, this is an actual antique chair that I believe was rescued from a flood in the state of Texas. How long ago was it rescued from? Maybe 100 years ago, because I am sitting in the home of dear friends at Ananda Village, Netri and Jivada, my longtime friends, because I'm here for Ananda's Spiritual Renewal Week, which is mostly online, but some of us who are speaking are also present. So I didn't want to let go of my morning broadcast in this new location, so we set me up. I think I look a bit like a medieval scholar sitting in my library, perhaps at Oxford. What do you think? It's a new look. I'm trying it out, but it's just going to be for these few days, and it'll become normal after. We'll resume what I'm accustomed to call normal after that. This is also Monday, and Monday's the day that I remind you that the capacity to carry on this mission, which includes publishing, helping to publish my latest book, Lightbearer, in Spanish and Italian, as well as the work that we're doing with all of these broadcasts, is all because of your wonderful enthusiasm for the mission of the Masters. So you can go to the Patreon website, which is a subscription donation system, or if you go to PayPal or just anywhere you can find, my own website is called Asha Joy, and you find donation information there. And you all have been wonderful teammates in this great effort to bring light to the world, and it's just a delight to be working with you for this noble cause. So let's start with a prayer and then we'll go on. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to feel your presence within us and to hear your voice, receive your vibrations, that we may move through this world constantly aware of the absolute need to stay deeply connected to your divine spirit. We are your children. Take us by the hand and take us home. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, my friends, we are up to Article 5 on these guidelines for members out of 16 articles. And this one is called Personal Habits. And at the last session that we had, it was just the general necessity to not simply continue as we are once we become serious about the spiritual path, but to really apply our minds and our hearts to the question of, if self-realization is my goal in life, how should I behave? What are my values? What is common in the world is to just simply live the way everybody else lives, follow the pattern that everybody else is living. If once we understand that there's another purpose here, we must be prepared to separate ourselves from the common flow. And we don't have to do it rebelliously or judgmentally or angrily, but we need to make our values consistent with what our aspirations are. So the next paragraph, the very short paragraph in Article 5, says their clothing, meaning the clothing of those who wish to be part of this Ananda way of life, for example, should be suitable, simple, should be suitable. That's the phrase he uses. I love that phrase. Swamiji is so terrific with words. If you're going to live the Ananda way of life, your clothing should be suitable. So he just leaves it like that. So you get to stop and think, what is suitable for someone who's searching for God. And then he defines it: simple, clean, and modest. That's the word he adds. Expressing at the same time a sense of dignity and self-worth as children of God. Here we have Swami's magnificent wordsmithing. When you actually analyze any of Swami's writing, you never find a superfluous word. And you find that every word he has contributes to the overall image of what he's trying to say. He himself said he never wrote a single word that he didn't feel was exactly in tune with the message that Master wanted him to convey. Simple, clean, and modest, expressing at the same time a sense of dignity and self-worth as children of God. And then Swami says, clothing that is shabby or tattered, where better clothes are available. Of course, if one is utterly impoverished and this is all one has, this is what you wear. But when there is an option, he says, shabby and tattered clothes reveal a lack of respect for others, which is not consonant with true inward renunciation. So in there, he sort of hits the whole story, doesn't he? Okay, well, I'll start with the end of it first, when he talks about shabby and tattered. Of course, one of the ways that we decide, well, I'm a renunciate, I'm only interested in God, nothing of the superficial world matters to me, so what difference does it make the kind of clothes I wear? And Swamiji said he was of that school when he was living as a young monk with Master at Mount Washington. And so he appeared one day in a t-shirt that had a big hole in it. And on that day, Rajarsi Janakananda, who was James J. Lynn, the American man who Master said was his most advanced disciple spiritually, and male disciple, and to whom he gave his spiritual mantle when Master passed and made Rajarsi the next president of SRF. He was Master's direct successor, spiritual successor. That man, Rajarsi, was coming to visit Mount Washington that day because at that time he lived in another city and only came to visit sometimes. And all the monks were going to be there to greet him. And when Master saw Swami in that tattered shirt, he said, that's inappropriate. You know, Rajarsi is coming today. We need, at all times, we need to present ourselves with dignity. Because Master knew that it was effortless for Swamiji to put on a shirt that didn't have holes in it. And to wear a shirt like that it might have been, that Swami didn't even notice, but it was more likely this is how I'm supposed to behave, because now I'm a renunciate. And Master Swami writes, this is not consistent with inward renunciation. It's making too big a point. Now, even in India, even when Swami was in India in 1958, and he would visit Ananda Ma, and the economy of India at that time was much more depressed than America at that time. And many of the people who followed Ananda Ma were not that well-to-do. But even to them, she said, you should not dress in tattered clothes, because it presents a disregard. And this is how Swami would put it about our clothing. He said it's rude to others. And this is where he says it doesn't show proper respect for others, because Swami said, after all, it's they who have to look at you. And if you make yourself an eyesore, you're imposing that eyesore on other people all the time. You're presenting yourself as not capable of knowing what proper attire is, or so impoverished that you can't dress properly, and so it'll make them wonder if they need to buy you new clothes. It's not attractive to look at. So this also goes back to the fact that Swami said to dress in an attractive way is not necessarily vanity, as he put it again. It's consideration for others. I had to learn this lesson from Swami. He taught me in a very dramatic way, which it took me a while to capture. I have never been a person who was profoundly influenced by fashion or by style. In fact, when I was 16 and I lived in California at that point. probably when I was a senior in high school, so maybe I was 17. The local department store, which was a fairly high-class department store, hired high school seniors, 2 from each high school in the area, and they called us young careerists, and they were sort of like training us to be in the retail field. I was so unconscious of so many things that I didn't really comprehend what the whole thing was about until much later. It was a job. It was a pleasant job. It was a nice paying job. I wanted it. So I talked my way into it because there was an interview, and that's where I can shine. If you give me words, I can do it. So I got selected, and I looked to be like I had a lot of promise. So they put us in these little uniforms, and we were there. And because I'd sort of been a shining candidate, they decided to give me the plum assignment. And the plum assignment was to work in the junior clothes department, where I got to sell girls' fashion clothes to other teenagers. They did not understand the psychology of the individual, which was me, which was, I thought all of this slavery to fashion was completely stupid and superficial, and most of the clothes in that department were just junk, and many of them were really ugly. So I was an absolute and total disaster in that department because I couldn't, even for a split second, give any serious energy, forgive me the word, for these nitwit teenagers who were coming in to buy things that they'd seen in a magazine. It was awful. And I nearly got fired. I was so bad. But then somebody thought that I might have more potential. So they took me into the sheets and towels department. And I love the sheets and towels department because people actually need sheets and towels. So I did like clothes. I sewed, I had, I dressed, I had fun. It wasn't like I was completely indifferent, but I was pretty rigid in my thinking. So when I got to being on the spiritual path, I just completely let it go. I actually went to my first Kriya initiation. I was remembering this. I went to my first Kriya initiation in a pair of Levi's and a navy blue t-shirt. For somehow I missed the memo where you were supposed to dress in white clothes, and it was supposed to be something like this. And I was only vaguely aware of the fact that I was dressed for working in the garden. And I was the only one who was there who was dressed for working in the garden. But I took my Kriya, and it seems to have taken, so everything was okay. But that was sort of where I was. And then I became a nun, and I didn't have much money, and most of the clothes I had, people had given them to me. All of this. Fast forward a couple of years, I'm traveling with Swami with a group of people, and we go to Carmel, which is this beautiful artist colony on the Big Sur coast in California. And it's a place where Swami would often go for relaxation, and I was part of the group sometimes that would go with him. And I distinctly remember appearing to go out to dinner, and I had on this slouchy brown sweater and this ankle-length gathered skirt, which was made out of this brown batik material. This was one of my better outfits. And I appeared in it, and Swami looked at me and he said, "Is that the only outfit that you brought? Just like this?" And I think it was the best. I said, "Well, it's the best one I brought." And he said, "We have to buy you a new dress like this." And now, this is the time in which I earned $50 a month from Swamiji. "We have to buy you a new dress." And there was about 6 or 7 other people on this trip. Swami takes me into some dress store there in Carmel, and he pulls off the rack. I am absolutely paralyzed. I'm just unable to think, unable to move, unable to respond. I'm absolutely paralyzed. He pulls this white shirtwaist dress, which is the pattern of a shirt, but in a long dress. The dress only came below my knee, and I always wore either long pants or skirts that came to my ankles because I was sort of a hippie, and that was the way I was. So he buys me this dress. It comes just below the knee, which was already a little more. It wasn't form-fitting by any means, but it was more form-fitting than anything I would wear. It was made out of this white cotton, and it was slightly translucent, so you could see my underwear. And I didn't have the slip that I needed to wear the dress, so I'm standing there in front of all my friends in this dress, absolutely frozen. How do you like it, Asha? I couldn't respond at all. I pointed out that you could see my underwear through it. Swami turns to all my friends, which were men and women together, says, "Pretend it's her bathing suit." That's what he said. and then, and then I had to wear it. Fortunately, somebody else had a slip, so at least I was able to cover that aspect of it. And so for like 2 days, I had to wear the dress, just like this. And then we were about to go home, back to Ananda village, which was very rustic. And every afternoon, one of the things we would offer to guests after Sunday service is that there would be a host and someone would take them around and show them what we called the farm at that point, which was really the community. The farm tour was a Sunday afternoon event. Swami Kriyananda has been sarcastic with me twice in 45 years. This was the first time. "Sir," I said, "when we get back to Ananda, do I have to keep wearing this dress?" He said, "No," he said, "we'll put it in a glass case in the barn and make it part of the farm tour." Oh, Lord. I was never able to put the dress on again. Never. I just could never wear it. It just, because it asked of me something I wasn't prepared to give. And I'll finish this, ironically. Swami in, I don't know what year it was, 1978, something like that. He went to Scotland. And let me just think what the cycle would have been. It was somewhere around in there. A couple of years later, Swami went to Europe. He went to Scotland. He brought back for me this beautiful blue sweater. He bought 3 sweaters for the 3 women, Seva, Kalyani, and me, who we were often together with Swami. So he bought 3 sweaters, identical sweaters for his 3 girls, is how he put it. Beautiful sweater. And then time passed, and I moved from Ananda village to Palo Alto, packed up everything. All the boxes, everything that we packed, I lost 1 box. And in that box was the white dress and the blue sweater. And I looked for that over and over again for years, but of course it was gone. The karma was really self-evident. You know, Swami had asked me to raise my energy. He'd asked me to stand in the dignity of being Master's disciple and not just sort of slump down, dressed in a garbage bag. And the reason why I wasn't able to dress with dignity was not because I was a renunciate. It was because I just didn't have clarity about what it meant to be a disciple. And it's very interesting. Everybody who knows Swami knows this. Swami always dressed. He would dress simply, just exactly, simple, clean, and modest, but always with dignity. That's actually the right word for it. And dignity is an extremely interesting word. And in many different occasions he would talk about. I remember once he gave us a very powerful Christmas message, but one of the lines was, "More dignity would add nicely to your childlike joy." Now those might seem a little contradictory. We're not dignified because I am important. We're dignified because we are representing a great master. And I felt that, I gradually became to understand that Swami felt whenever he went out anywhere in the world, he was representing Master. And he wanted to represent Master with the vibration that was appropriate for Master. And Master was very dignified. And Master was deep. Master was noble. And Master was also, and we as disciples, we have a right to claim the magnitude of what we're doing, but not personally. But also then other people see us, and they see you, and you make a certain impression on them. And that impression needs to be appropriate for someone who's representing this great teaching. And Swami really wanted me to develop the courage to stand strong in who we are and what we believe. And the dress itself was unimportant, it wasn't, but the extremeness of my response was not humility. You see, it was the opposite of humility. It was extraordinary self-concern and excessive self-concern, even to constantly say, I'm nothing, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. The emphasis is always on the I. It's not on nothing. If you really are nothing, it doesn't occur to you to constantly be announcing it. You just are nothing, and it just goes away. So over years, one works with this, but this is a very important aspect of living the Ananda way, is to live with grace and simple, clean. And he uses the word modest, and modest as a person in a female body. Modest in our particular age is really quite a question, isn't it? I have to be careful not to become a curmudgeonly old lady. Even when I was 19 and 20 years old, and I had a year or two of riotous living that I very quickly lost interest in and became quite different. But it was very interesting. Even when I was living riotously, I still dressed like a nun. It was just, and I heard, and I can't take credit for this phrase, but I think this phrase is so magnificent. This is much more about women than men, and being a woman, I feel I can speak to it. Satguru, who's a very well-respected and well-known teacher of our times, when he was asked by college students, college women, about appropriate attire, he said, well, a person has many different dimensions. We're intellectual, we're emotional, we're spiritual beings, we're physical beings. We have talents. We have we have destinies that we're trying to express. We have ambitions. We have so many different issues, and we carry it all in a body. A female body, there's a tradition, that a female body can be made beautiful and can be made alluring. And in a culture such as the planet is going through right now, especially in the West, but unfortunately now spreading all over the planet, sexual feminine allure has become, such a common value that people don't even think about it. So, and many women claim their right, to be sexually alluring, and then they just feel that if other people are made uncomfortable with that, well, that's just their problem. First of all, I think that's rude. I think that's very inconsiderate. And I think that we're all human beings together, and we ought to pay attention to the realities of our humanity and not just throw each other under the bridge. But Sadhguru answered it by saying, he said, when you dress in a way that makes a point of your feminine body, and so that anybody who meets you before you speak knows that you're a female in a female body, and may actually have the opportunity to assess how alluring you are from a certain perspective, Sadhguru says simply, you're just leading with your biology, is how he put it. You're making your first statement your biology. So he said, you have to make a decision if that's what you want to do. And it was such a brilliant articulation. It just is what it is. I've never wanted to leave with my biology, among other things, just especially for me. The biology just seemed quite incidental to who I was. But walking around in a female body, especially when I was much younger and had a very different look to me, I didn't want people to think of me first in terms of my biology. It just seemed to me like a very difficult obstacle to overcome. I would much rather be regarded for many other qualities. And since biology is a reality, we can make all the judgments we want about how it shouldn't be. But folks, it is. But now our society has just gone so much that direction that very little is kept secret. From how plunging the necklines are, or how skin tight the trousers are, or whatever it is. And, many people are quite beautiful, and they carry that off in a magnificent way. Their biology is very attractive. But is that really what we want to do? And do we want to keep our relationships with people so forcefully biological that all these other values, we have to struggle to find them? And of course, unfortunately, what happens is it becomes common, and so everybody's necklines are plunging now. I saw some poor interview on television. It was just a few minutes of it, and there was like 3 men and 1 woman, and this woman, she was wearing as little as she could possibly wear above the waist, and still whatever censorship still exists. And her biology was so, even over the tiny TV screen, and God knows how I even saw this. I don't know where I was, but even over the tiny TV screen, she just screams, I have a female body, and isn't it alluring like this? And I watched, now perhaps I'm projecting, but I watched the 3 men who were also on the couch or whatever, they were having one of those shows, try so hard to pretend they weren't aware of that. It felt to me like it was just coming like a cloud out of the room. And I watched that poor woman try to pretend that she was comfortable being like that. I mean, it was agonizing, the whole thing. And forget the word dignity. There wasn't an ounce of dignity in it. Now, most people who live at Ananda are not going to go that far. But let's not just, what did Swami say before? Ananda members should sift mentally through their personal habits and not continue unthinkingly in old patterns of behavior. So when it comes to clothes, we have to think about it. Am I sloppy? Am I unattractive? Am I deliberately just making a mess of myself? Or do I respect the temple of God within me and present myself in a modest, simple, clean way that allows me to lead with what's really important to me? I don't think that these are small issues. I speak from some experience on this because it was a fairly long learning cycle for me to come to peace with it. And now I see the pressures on people, on men and women. The pressures on them are so intense. And young people especially are just given so little guidance. I'll end with this last experience. It's just my heart goes out to them. And I'm not in much of a position to really influence. I was interviewed by 2 high school seniors from the local high school who were doing some film project on community. So they interviewed me. It was summer. They were very attractive, like 17-year-old girls. And they were wearing, again, about as little as you could wear and still actually be considered dressed. These kinds of tops that fall off to show clearly that there's no bra, that there's just the blouse is falling off. Shorts are cut as short as they can possibly be and still actually hold together as legs. And they were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Their biology was lovely. They were also super smart and really capable. And after it was over, they'd interviewed me, so I interviewed them. And I did it, I believe, in a non-threatening way. We just had a conversation. I said, have you ever given any thought to the way you're dressed? And they said, well, that's how everybody dresses. I said, yeah, but have you ever given any thought to it? Have you ever given any thought to the imposition of your biology on anybody walking down the street? And I said, I'm not a prude. I'm not trying to dictate your behavior, but is that the response you want to get from total strangers? I said, if you're interested in someone, that's one thing, but you want total strangers to be conscious of your biology whenever you walk down the street. I think it was a little sophisticated for them, and a little resistant. And they also said to me, well, how would we know? I said, I don't know. You might have a father, you might have a mother, you might have an aunt, an uncle, a boyfriend, a gay person, who would talk to you. It's like your priest, your teacher, somebody might talk to you. Nobody. At least they acted to me as if the thought had never been discussed. I think it's a very interesting subject and an extremely important subject if you're going to be a human being, and if you're going to be a human being, a happy human being, and if you want to have happy relationships, we have to think about what we're creating. And then one of the girls got herself together enough to say, well, if someone has a response to me like that, that's their problem. And it was interesting because we'd just been talking about community and what forms community. I said, well, yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable way to feel. It's not a very nice way to treat your friends, though. If you know that somebody is susceptible to heroin, you don't shoot up heroin in front of them. If you know they're an alcoholic, you don't stand with a whiskey glass in your hand. Well, we're all sexual beings, and we're always being attracted to each other. If you don't intend to follow through on that, maybe you should just, as a friend, think about how you present yourself. They said. I said, So, Ananda members should sift mentally through their personal habits and not just continue unthinkingly in the way that the whole world is going. Why would we do that? Now, I'm not judging. I'm really not. I'm just observing and suggesting, why don't we think about it? Okay, my friends, God bless you.